Hi guys, it's Olivia here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm so excited to give you my 3K celebration video. Thank you so much for 3,000 subscribers. I'm so thankful for all of you here, for all of you who watch, who comment and who interact with me or have shouted me out recently. I really appreciate the support. Yes, we do need to acknowledge that a lot of you guys started to find me after you were supporting Black creators due to the murder of George Floyd, and the celebration is a little bit tinged with some sadness because of this, because it took that to be able to grow my channel. I sailed past 2K when I wasn't really in the mood to film something or celebrate, and then into 3K after that, but I'm still thankful and I still wanted to celebrate with you guys, and I thought that a great way to do that would be by making a video. And I put on Twitter a thank you message and asked what you would like to see, and Ola from Ola Magic replied recommending that I recommend books based on my favourite things, which could be a great way to get to know me a little bit better. I do have an old video up with 50 facts about me, which is not actually that long despite it being 50 facts, so I'll link that down below if you would like to get to know me personally better if you're new here. But if you want some book recommendations as well, let's talk about a few of my favourite things. I've got 10 books to recommend here and 10 favourite things. The first one that I'm going to do is my favourite animal, and this did transform over time. It used to be dolphins and now my favourite animals are owls. So for owls I decided to go with a book that kept me up at night, and for that I'm going to be recommending the Legend Trilogy by Mary Lou. So I had this book with me when I was babysitting, and it was really late at night. I was starting to feel really tired and the parents just were not home yet, and I needed something that would keep me up. I started reading Legend and I got like halfway through very quickly. I raced through this, and then I came home. Even though it was like the middle of the night and I was exhausted, I read the whole book. I stayed up even later, even though my eyes were literally closing while I was babysitting. And the next day I read all of the second book, and the day after that I read all of the third book, so I literally raced through the series. It is one that will keep you up. I don't think it's the best series overall. I think I rated the first one 3 stars and then the second one 5 and then 3, which matches my ratings for the Hunger Games, funnily enough. But I just feel like with dystopian young adult, there's something that can be so addictive, so thrilling, that just keeps you turning pages all the way through. Haven't even told you what this book is about yet. So you follow Day and June. It's set in this dystopian world, and Day is kind of the Robin Hood of this world, and June works for the authorities in this world. And when June's brother is murdered, Day becomes the prime suspect and she decides she's going to hunt him down. However, in this game of cat and mouse, maybe not everything is as it seems. It was a really good book, and I think the second book is the best one in this series. Literally blew my mind, but I am looking forward to reading the continuation series, Rebel by Mary Lou, hopefully soon. Then we have my favourite colour, and for my favourite colour, well, my favourite colour is orange, specifically sunset orange. I love those tones. The sky is like a moving work of art. How do people not spend time watching sunrises and sunsets every single day of their lives? So I really love sunsets, and for that I chose a book that has the best series ending, because the sunset is the end of a day, and for that I chose Light by Michael Grant. So when I was doing this recommendation video, I didn't want to choose loads of books that I'd already recommended, but this is literally the best series ending ever. I feel like series endings are so hard to get right, but this one does it so well. It shows you where all the characters ends up, it closes the plot, it is very realistic, it shows you a bit of what happens after the plot is all finished up, so you can see how it's still affecting the characters a little bit later down the line. It literally gave me everything I wanted and more, and I literally like raced through this and then screamed once I finished. So the first book in the series, Gone, follows this area, Perdido Beach, where there are loads of kids, and what happens is, in a flash, poof, all the adults disappear, everyone over the age of 15 disappears, a dome falls over the city, and all of the children start, well, not all of them, some of the children start to develop superpowers, and loads of things happen from there. It is a crazy, wild ride. Next up we have my favourite instrument, and my favourite instruments is the harp. Not many people on booktube or like on my bookish online world know that I play the harp. I love the harp. However, I haven't played in quite a while because I'm lending out my harp to someone while I'm at uni, because it's just too big for me to bring from the Netherlands to the UK for a couple months while I'm there, and then I come back, and it's a whole deal. A harp is a big instrument, but I do play the harp. I don't mention it too much because I like to have a hobby that's just for me. And so I wanted to choose a book which features music in it, and for that I've chosen Ecstasy by Mary Sharratt. Ecstasy follows the story about Alma Mahler and is actually fiction, historical fiction, that's based off of her true diary. And Alma Mahler is the person who marries Gustav Mahler, who was a very famous composer. However, what people don't know is that she also composed her own works, and music was very much her passion. However, her husband wanted her to give it up, and she does try to do so, and this is her story about how she struggles with stifling her creative passion so that she could please her husband, and what that leads to and the impact that it has on her mental health and her entire life. So this one is like one of those slow-paced, slow magic books, the ones where like not a lot is happening but you're really following a character and their emotions. And while I feel like Alma does yield a lot to what Gustav Mahler wants, you can see the detrimental effect it has on her mental health, on her whole life and her whole being, and how it's really seeping into everything she does. And I feel like it's a very good book about how we should not give up what we love to do for other people. I really enjoyed reading it, and I love seeing how music was just infused with this book all the way through. It made me go and listen to the music afterwards because the way it was described, so beautiful. Then the next one is my favourite drink, and no one's going to be surprised here when I say that tea is one of my favourite drinks. And I decided a book that goes well with tea is literally any book. I always drink tea while I'm reading, but I feel like I'm going to choose a non-fiction book because tea is something you digest, you let it sink into you, you let it heat you up and like reach all the areas of your body. And that's exactly what we need to do in non-fiction. We need to absorb it, we need to understand it, and we need to let it reflect how it's going to affect our lives and what we're going to change so that we can better incorporate this in our lives. And I'm going to choose a book that I read back in January, which was Your Silence Will Not Protect You by Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde is my favourite essayist. The way she words things, the way she says things, she is just down to earth, and she's going to tell it to you in a simple, straight and effective manner. If she uses a metaphor to describe what she's talking about, she's got the perfect one for you to understand. And she was a black female lesbian, and her essays are very intersectional. She's talking about what it means to be a black woman, she's talking about what it means to be a lesbian and how people perceive her because of that, and she also makes sure that she's including other people's narratives and saying how it reflects on other marginalized communities, and it's just so good. Please go read her essays and learn from them. She's got so much to say, she's so wise. And at the end of the book there is also some of her poetry, and her poetry is absolutely fantastic. I can't stress enough how great this collection is. Next thing we're going to talk about is my favourite season, and my favourite season is summer. I'm literally living right now. I love the sunshine, I love the heat, I love the long days, I love light. So I'm digging the summer, and I decided to choose a book that reminds me of summer. When I think of summer, I always think of the beach, and if we're thinking of the beach, I think of We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. So We Are Okay is what I would call a slice of life book. Again, another slow magic one. It's a quiet book. It's a contemporary that is very character driven, and although there's some plot in this one, I wouldn't say that the plot grand reveal is the main point. I think the point is the emotions and the character and everything that she's going through. So not to spoil anything, I'll just give a brief synopsis. So in this one we follow Marin, and one day she just packed up and left everything of her old life behind her once she discovers something that literally shocks her to the core and makes her feel like she needs to isolate herself from everyone. So she's gone off to university to kind of be alone and recover and process her emotions, and her best friend Mabel from her old town where she used to come from has decided she's going to come visit her university, and Mabel brings up all these old memories and makes her confront what happened. This book was really good for how it described loneliness and grief. I feel like it did those two topics very well. The writing is beautiful, it makes me think of summer, and I love books that have summer in them, and as well as that it's got some like sapphic tones in here as well, so definitely read that one for this too. And I believe this one is Own Voices' favourite non-bookish hobby, and for that I have to say yoga. I love yoga equally as much as reading. It's something that really has changed my life and really helped me for the better. I even have an Instagram that's completely dedicated to yoga and cooking and food because I also like that, so there'll be a link to that down below. But yes, yoga is really something that calms me, it grounds me, it keeps me like fit because I use it as exercise as well, and it just makes me so happy and gives me all those positive emotions. So for that, I wanted to choose a book that makes me happy, that makes me feel calm, and if I had to choose any book like that, I have to go with an Alexis Hall romance book. Alexis Hall is a new adult author who writes mainly romances as far as what I've read of him so far, its own voices. I'm going to recommend Waiting for the Flood by Alexis Hall. This one I read when I just needed something calming. It's a novella, so it's not very long, it doesn't take too much dedication. It's also got no explicit scenes. Often Alexis Hall's books do have explicit scenes in them, but in Waiting for the Flood there are none, and it's just about these two characters who live in England. He writes British romance, it's very British, it's brilliant, and one of the men has gone through a breakup a couple years ago and he's just still not over it. He's very grumpy, he lives alone, he isolates himself, and when he is preparing for his town to flood, because in England we sometimes get a lot of floods in certain places, the like flood control people come in and start helping the people to prepare their houses for flooding, and one of them is this ginger, very extroverted, very funny, very happy guy, and he starts helping the grumpy guy protect his house, and they start a romance, and it's adorable and it's lovely, and it was everything you need to smile by the end of the book. Then I'm going to talk about my favourite flower. I love white roses. I think they are so pure, but they are so painful as well because they've also got thorns and all of that, and I think purity plus the like thorny aspect of them just make them absolutely gorgeous flowers. So I chose a book that is painful but so pure at the same time, and I talked about this a lot because this is a middle grade book that literally blew my mind last year, and that is The Space We're In by Katya, Balen, and it's illustrated by Laura Carlin. So this book follows Frank and Max. Frank is 10 and Max is 5, and Max is his autistic brother. Max struggles with colours, with certain flavours, with sudden movements, with anything that breaks out of his usual daily routine. So the family are kind of very orientated around looking after Max and supporting Max. However, Frank, being a 10-year-old boy, does need some love and attention too. So we kind of follow that dynamic. We also have the parents, the dad who's always at work and the mum who has to stay at home and look after Max and Frank, and is very stressed by doing this all of the time. So yeah, that's the setup, and then tragedy strikes the family and they have to adapt and get used to it and process it. This book gave me so many emotions and it's really, really good. I love what it said about siblings, about how love manifests. It was very coming of age, even though it's not like the teenager coming of age, it's the childhood coming of age. Frank is really learning about himself, about Max, and how him and Max fit together as brothers. I loved seeing Frank and his friends interact. I loved seeing how we get to see adults as human people who are their own entities, who have their own problems, and who are perfect in their imperfections. It was just overall such a hit for me. While it's not own voices for the autistic rep, the author is someone who works for a non-profit organisation which is catered towards supporting autistic people in their creative journeys. 3 more to go. So the next thing I want to recommend a book about is by my favourite bookish quotes. So choosing a favourite bookish quote is severely hard for me because there are so many great quotes in so many books, but I've decided to just go with one of the ones that I heard in my childhood, which has always stuck with me, and that's the Dr. Seuss quote. "Today is your day, you're off to great places, you're off and away." It's motivating, it brings sunshine, and it reminds me that every day is a brand new start to do what you want, to do better, or to just live your life and see where it's going to take you. And for that, I want to recommend a book that made me want to go somewhere, and I was actually supposed to go there this year, but with the pandemic my plans were cancelled. So I read Patron Saints of Nothing by Ribay last year, and this is the art copy. The final cover looks like this, which is absolutely stunning, and this is a book about Jay. He lives in the US and he finds out that his cousin, who he used to be close to, Jun, has died in the Philippines. However, nobody's being specific about what happened in the Philippines that led to his death, and Jay decides he's going to go to the Philippines, to his family over there, and find out for himself. I felt like this did two things very, very well. Well, it did everything exceptionally well, but there were two things that I especially took away from this novel. The first one was a different perspective on grief. A lot of the books that focus on grief focus on a relationship that is close to you, but the grieving process can be very deep, but also look a little bit different when it's someone that you used to know who you're not close with anymore, and I don't see that kind of grief represented much in books, so it was kind of refreshing to read it in here and see how the author handled that. And as well as that, this was the first book I believe I read set in the Philippines, and it just taught me so much because it does focus on the political situation happening over there under a certain president and how violent it is, and it was very shocking and eye-opening to me because this was a situation I knew nothing about previous to reading this book, and then I did a lot of research and it just opened my mind to a new situation. It reminds me of how much I'm always reading when learning and how important it is to read across the grid as much as I possibly can, because I can just keep learning about so many situations that are important and affect people worldwide. The next thing I'm going to talk about is my favourite superhero. I'm not that big on superheroes, however my younger sister is, which means by default I've learned a lot about superheroes, and I do have my favourite. My favourite superhero of all time is Batman. He wears a lot of black. I love black. He doesn't have a superpower that comes from something supernatural. He's just a human trying to do the best that he can. I really support the idea of somebody who doesn't have superpowers trying to do the best they can for people. That's fantastic. It's also set in Gotham, which is this really dark city. There's a lot more to Batman that I love that I could get into, but we're here for the book recommendations, not for me to just talk about superheroes. For Batman, I wanted to choose a book that was very dark in a way, or was just not what I expected. I expected to not like it and then I ended up loving it. And for this, I'm going with This Is How You Lose Her by Juno Diaz. So This Is How You Lose Her is a short story collection, however all of the short stories interlink. They interlink because they're following the same character, but they are distinctly short stories following different parts or times in his life. They're all interconnected, but they're all separate, and I think that was a masterful way of handling the short story collection. And it's basically about cheating. And I hate books on cheating. It's just something I don't really enjoy reading about. So in each short story there's something to do with cheating, or about how you lose your girlfriend by doing something terrible, or just you lose a relationship by doing something awful that you shouldn't have done. And it made me feel a lot of things, because we do follow this main character throughout them and we get to see why they are the way they are, what situations they've grown up in to lead to that. However, they're not using the background as an excuse for everything, but it's just giving you some guidance into how he thinks about relationships and what his perspective on relationships are. We can see when he makes mistakes, we can see when he's choosing not to correct those mistakes, and we get to see a lot about his culture. The writing was absolutely fantastic and very, very beautiful. However, I want to be mindful about the author when we go into this book. So Juno Diaz has been accused of sexual assault by some woman. However, research was done into it apparently, and the results came up inconclusive, and it seems a bit shady to me. I'll let you look into that yourself and make up your own mind. I didn't know this when I read the book, and I didn't buy the books. I was borrowing them from a friend. And then last but not least, Ola also mentioned favourite place, and my favourite place in the world is home. And to me, home is where my best friends and my family are, especially where my family are. This is why I use the word home interchangeably for the Netherlands and the UK, because I've got my sisters in the UK and I've got my parents and one sister in the Netherlands, so I just use it interchangeably because I see both places as home. So if I'm choosing a book based on home, I decided to choose one where the sister relationship is really, really good, and for that I've got a series I've recently read and recommended, and that is the Chocolate Box Girls series by Cathy, Cassidy. I really, really love these books. It's basically about these two families that become one family as the parents have their own children and are coming together. In one family we've got Paddy and Cherry, a father-daughter duo, and in the other family we've got a mother and her 4 children, Honey, Sky, Summer and Coco. And the two families come together, and it's a struggle because they have to get used to each other, they have to get to know each other, and the bonds that they form and the way that they talk about siblings in this book, it's not distinctly just about that. It hits home with me. I'm also from a big family. I've got 3 sisters. 6 people's a big family, I guess. and yeah, the way that the sisters interacted, like having maybe one sister they talked to about one thing and one sister they felt more comfortable talking about another thing with, but loving them all equally, and maybe spending time closer to the one who's your own age but still loving the other two, in just the love that families have, or the love that you can have for people who are equivalent to your family in your life. It's just so hard to name or word or pinpoint, but I felt like these books did a very good job of showing it. Truthfully, what it's about is each of these girls have a different struggle during their book, and they focus on that book. There's one that has to do with, well, one of them's to do with like blending into the family, moving in, one's got to do with the eating disorder, one's got to do with animal abuse, and they all focus on something different, so you are getting different themes, but running across it is the blending of these two families, and also facing divorce, as the mother in this family was previously married and has had a divorce. Whew, so that was a lot of book recommendations. This video is a bit longer than I expected, but I hope that you pick up some of these. Let me know in the comment section down below if you've read any of these, if you want to read any of these, and let me know your favourite instrument. I'm curious to see what the answers will be. Thank you so much for subscribing, and I'm so happy to have you guys here with me talking books. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!